The competitive edge is how do we build these things way more efficiently and way cheaper? If we think about the Bitcoin mining ecosystem, what I take pride in is I think we can build Bitcoin mining data centers that power Bitcoin compute much cheaper and more efficiently, maintaining quality than our peer set. And that's the same type of mentality we want to bring to traditional data centers. But that's not the problem we need to solve today. The problem we need to solve today is people.
What's going on, guys? We got a great episode for you today. It is with Asher Genoot. He is the CEO of Hut 8, one of the leading companies when it comes to Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. In this conversation, he breaks down what the business is, why it's important, how they actually are thinking about deploying capital, how they're selecting sites, and what the difference is between Bitcoin mining and those AI data centers. This conversation is going to give you a peek into the future of energy and compute, and it's really going to highlight how important this intersection is right now. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you listen to the whole thing, I promise you're going to learn something new about these industries. And so here's my latest conversation with Asher. I thought a great place to start the conversation is you guys provide energy, and energy seems to be this thing that somehow has gotten demonized over time, but it is foundational to civilization and the success of humans in these civilizations. So talk a little bit about the importance of energy, and then we can get into how you guys are kind of pioneering this new use of energy.
I think that's exactly right. There's this kind of idea and belief that anything that consumes energy is bad. And if you look at kind of the progression of humanity, we've only consumed more and more energy on an exponential scale, right? One of the largest culprits and consumers of energy is air conditioning system. Imagine living without AC units and living in our lives today. And so, and heaters, not just cooling, right? As we look through, so the World Bank kind of had this beautiful graph, and it's GDP per capita of every single country, and then energy consumption per capita. And there's essentially a linear correlation. The more energy you consume per capita, the higher your GDP is per capita as a country as well. And so I think that is extremely fascinating because there's this general idea of consuming energy is bad for the world, it's bad for the environment. But the reality is technology and every technological advancement we've had requires energy in order to move forward. And if we really think about it, I mean, even the food we put into our bodies, there's energy that went into producing that food, right? And so I think for us, as we think about the business, it's how do we sit at that intersection of power and technology, and how do we build infrastructure that supports the technologies of tomorrow, all the new innovations. So when we started the company, Bitcoin compute was a big thing, is how do we create this decentralized system, but have really rigorous and robust security? And we essentially had proof of work, and we created large scale mining sites. And then now there is like AI compute and data centers for AI compute. How do you power AI? And I think it's really important that America is at the forefront of that and having the platforms that do so. But those two types of data centers are very, very different load profiles, right? A data center for Bitcoin compute, you can shut off the data center as long as power prices are high because you're price sensitive, you're agnostic on the mission critical of that infrastructure. A data center, you're mission critical and you're not shutting down for power prices, so you're running through it. So where you place a tier 3 AI compute data center versus where you place a Bitcoin compute data center are different. And the models are different. And so for us, it's really understanding the technology, the load profile of that consumption, and then how do we build infrastructure that supports it and connect that into the grid and different power systems. So as a company, we have sites connected front of the meter just directly into the transmission grids, behind the meter at power generation facilities. And then we've also spent some time looking at island facilities because we own 4 power plants ourselves in Ontario. And so we've been looking a lot about what if you built power generation for the consumption? And it's not a new or interesting novel concept. Like that's happened historically. If you think about aluminum smelters, steel mills, paper mills, like we've done this in America before when these kind of industries existed and were thriving back in the day.
So there's like old use cases of energy, and then there's what I'll call kind of net new or new industry use cases for this energy. You mentioned Bitcoin and AI, which are the two that you guys are kind of running full speed at. Those seem to be the two largest consumers, but also the most important from like a market cap creation, a value standpoint. Do you think there will be other ones as well? Before we get into talking about your Bitcoin and AI business, like is this, okay, first was Bitcoin, now AI, and there's going to be 5 or 6 other of these over time? Or is it pretty much Bitcoin and AI is what you see on the horizon?
No, I think so. I mean, if you asked me 2 years ago, what would be the next use case? I mean, we were going deep in green hydrogen, carbon capture, industrial batteries. We were looking at like the kind of the domestication of manufacturing at scale for these large industries. And so, I mean, we weren't thinking data centers because until recently with AI, you couldn't go place a data center outside of a main tier one market. Now, because of the training and the GPU clusters, like data centers are going to new regions. Like we just announced a deal in Louisiana that we purchased a project for, and that's focused on the AI side of the business. And so AI has been this new massive consumer of this demand, and obviously the technology merits the amount of hype around it. But I do believe that there will continue to be new and large use cases for power at scale.
Why is Louisiana not an area that people have previously gone? And you mentioned that now it's possible, but like walk me through that deal, right? In terms of whatever you can share to really highlight how these new consumption components for this energy. We know flare gas mitigation. It sounds like there's other things with AI, but like this really changes kind of the energy map, if you will. And so talk me through that Louisiana deal.
Sure. So when you think about kind of the data center market historically, there were kind of tier one markets, tier two markets, and tier one hubs are like Ashburn, Virginia. I think a lot of that first started with like government demand, and then you built these clusters. And ultimately, if you think about interconnectivity is important when you think about data centers and how data can go from one location to another. And so the more of a cluster of a data center market you can have, the better. And then the fiber lines were built around that. I mean, there's no like secret sauce on why were these a data center markets. Is they were built there. The fiber connectivity was built there. The interconnections between these different places built a lot of fiber to connect these different hubs. And that's why you had kind of these tier one markets. And so Louisiana was never a data center hub, right? And so when GPUs became a thing, the reason why being a tier one market matters is your latency on your data center and how quickly you can ping that data center, transfer information, and so forth. With GPUs and AI training, it was a little bit different because the real need is how much can we train for as cheap and as large as we can, and then we can send that information somewhere else where there can be inference on that in order to run your application layer. And so there was this openness with kind of NVIDIA obviously becoming one of the most valuable companies in the world, OpenAI, xAI, and there's this AI race to build these large training campuses. And the requirements were less so on latency and more so on power and scale of facilities. And so like in areas that are already pretty tapped out, it's hard to find that scale of land and power. And so people started saying, you know what? We're open to looking at other markets. And so for Hut 8, we have a large footprint in Texas. And we were like, okay, we have exposure in Texas. We have some other sites in Canada, upstate New York. Where are other markets we think could be really, really interesting data center markets? And so we kind of looked around the whole US. And one of the markets we isolated into was Louisiana. And the primary reason is when you think about what makes a good data center market, like one, what does the fiber connectivity look like? And so Louisiana sits right in between Texas, Alabama, Atlanta. And so like Alabama is trying to be like a Louisiana where like it's really Atlanta's a massive data center market. If you think about kind of Dallas is a massive data center hub. And so Louisiana sits right in between that kind of fiber corridor. And so from a fiber perspective, can you be either an overflow market for Texas, or can you be an alternative to kind of the congested Atlanta markets to hit into kind of the whole southern region of the world, right? And so that was one. From a fiber connectivity perspective, it's actually really interesting. And there are a lot of long haul fiber rides with good latency. The second is like Louisiana is also one of our biggest energy hubs in the US, right? You have so much gas coming out of Louisiana that gets transported to the rest of the US. So instead of transporting that gas to other places in the US, where then they turn that gas into electricity, that electricity into AI compute, why not just like keep it at the source? And so really, really interesting energy market. And then three, the regulatory side. You have a new governor, Governor Landry. He's been amazing and so pro-business. Him and the legislator passed last year a data center sales and use tax exemption on data centers. It's trying to welcome the industry into the market. So you had a very pro-business, pro-AI data center political regime. And so for us, we're like, this is a really interesting place. So we started doing a lot of work on the project, and then Meta announced their big site in northern Louisiana, and that really further validated, because we still have to try to convince people, no, this could be an interesting market. And people were like, I don't know, it's Louisiana, I'm not sure, there's no data centers there. When Meta kind of announced it to help put it on the map, and obviously we were already deep intertwined. I think even probably same time or pre even Meta. And so we're excited for Louisiana. We think it's an interesting new market. We think we have seen a lot of demand for that area. We think aside from just our projects, that there will be more projects in the long term. It's a regulated utility. It's not a competitive choice market. And so unlike ERCOT, like you have Energy Louisiana, and that needs to be very thoughtful to how does this load profile come and how to make sure ratepayers are protected. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic and maneuvering. It's a hard energy market to navigate. And it's funny because people deep in the energy space have given us a lot of kudos for navigating the area, but they've been awesome and great partners, both from a utility perspective, local, state, parish president Kenny, state officials, the governor himself, and they've been all really supportive. And so that's a great example of a project in our development pipeline that we take a bet on for a multitude of reasons. And our site specifically sits in a very, very generation heavy area. We bought almost 600 acres of land there, and we have massive transmission lines that go through the property. And so we had to get like 14 landlords to sell and kind of put this piece of property together. And the line that we're connected to is directly into the nuclear substation. And so that's exciting too, that it's connected to the grid and going straight into that substation. And so overall, we think that's an interesting site. But look, it's one of the many sites in our development pipeline. This was announced to the world earlier than I wanted to. We had a public hearing and it got leaked, and then it was all over the news. But we have a lot of different sites that we have a similar philosophy, and like how do we build, and where are these data different hubs, and where can we be competitive and have a competitive edge to other peers.
So you go and you acquire the 600 acres, bunch of work goes into it. How do you decide whether you build a Bitcoin data center or a AI data center?
So there's a couple big drivers. In an ideal world, you find a site that can do both, right? And so a lot of our sites in Texas, we can put Bitcoin because power is cheap. You can curtail around the power volatility to drive down your price down. And then there are AI use cases like one of the Stargate campuses. They're building a mega campus in the Abilene site in Texas. And so Texas is a really interesting market for that because you can drive down your cost of capital, the cost of energy. And as a Bitcoin miner, your cost of energy is what you care about most. Louisiana is a regulated energy market. And so you have less of that ability to curtail around that energy volatility because your capacity payments are higher. It's the kind of slippage between just your pure energy rate and your kind of transmission delivery fees. In Texas, if you're pulling at a transmission level, you can drive those fees down a lot. And really the majority of your payments are for the energy component. In a place like Louisiana, that's not the case. And so for Bitcoin, it's a lot harder to operate there because the power prices are higher and you can't curtail around that volatility. And so this site was purpose developed for AI and traditional data center development in areas like we have this Vega campus, a 205 megawatt campus in Texas and Amarillo, interconnected with the wind farms, connected to the grid as well for the redundancy. And that's a great example of like, we were able to get that site who said we can pull power here within 3 quarters. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no data center can do that. We came in, we locked it up with Bitcoin and procured the power. And then over time, we can do whatever use case we want there.
Yeah. And what's the cost difference between building these data centers, right? The Bitcoin ones are 1/5, 1/10, 1/50th the cost. Like what does that look like?
Yeah, massive difference. So the Vega project we're building for a little over $400,000 a megawatt. Wow. And that's all in cooling systems, racks, foundation, civil, electrical, everything, not including the chips themselves. That's probably around half the price of anyone else building it. We vertically integrate a lot of the designs and the equipment ourselves. So that's not kind of the industry standard. I think industry standard probably is closer to $700 to $1 million a megawatt there. A traditional tier 3 data center, liquid cooled, is somewhere between 10 to 13 million a megawatt. And prices have gone up because labor is hard to get. So you have to pay per diem and overtime, obviously materials and long lead time items. So it was, I think, traditionally probably closer to the 10. You're seeing kind of 10 to 13 because people are trying to build quickly and they're overpaying to build, but much, much more expensive.
And what is the profitability of the difference of these things, right? Bitcoin, obviously, people know can be really, really profitable.
Right.
At times, though, if you got the wrong power costs,
Right.
you can be on the wrong side of that. AI, I think people see all the hype and they're like, well, somebody's making money somewhere. So